Hello and welcome everybody to our LinkedIn Live webinar focused on managing your software engineering team. My name is Steve Taplin, the CEO of Sonatify Technology. I'm really excited and honored. Looks like we have people jumping on now. And this has certainly been a hot topic in the industry of when engineering teams are growing rapidly. There it always seems to be challenges of making sure you're managing your team right. You understand the metrics, you understand the productivity of each developer, and that's what we are focused on here today. So while everybody's joining, we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, my name is Steve Taplin. I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We are a nearshore custom software development company headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona, with over 100 full-time developers throughout Latin America. We work on modern cloud and mobile-based projects. With me today is Edgar Garcia, who is our lead project manager with Sonatify. He is the guy working day in and day out with clients, solving these exact challenges of helping them to get organized so that they can have the right metrics. And then we're very lucky to have special guest Larry Heminger, who is the CTO of Jabra Hearing. Larry has long been a friend and a client with Sonatify and an advisor, and brings a wealth of knowledge. And we're going to talk about our approach to this at Sonatify, how we go about it. And then Larry's going to talk about real life test cases of what he has done in both previous organizations and with his current organization. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're excited, and let's dive right in. And once again, Sonatify is a custom software development company. Our key niche is helping clients with same time zone support, fully bilingual senior engineers out of Latin America. Some key things outside of from a custom software development perspective, we also offer to build custom AI MVPs for clients and prospective clients. I like to laugh, but if you put 10 technical leaders in a room, ask them all what AI is, you're pretty much going to get 10 different answers. And the way we like to attack AI is the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's how we like to attack AI. And so we have a strong AI consultancy practice, and we offer, tell us a problem you're trying to solve and give us access to either your data, scrubbed or dummy data. And we will build for free a free MVP teaching a model to do what you're looking for. We do this to build trust with clients, and a lot of senior technology executives have had very good luck having this AI MVP and using it to sell to other executives in their company why there should be additional investment there. We also are currently offering 100% free code assessments. In the past, we charged 10 to 15,000 for these. And this is just another way we're focused on building trust with clients. And so with that, let's jump right in now to engineering metrics for agile teams. I'm going to turn this over to Edgar Garcia, our lead project manager. Edgar, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Well, thank you very much for attending this talk. And managing both in-house and external development teams comes with unique challenges, especially when trying to maintain efficiency and productivity. It's essential to track performance metrics that will highlight how resources contribute to your company's goals or your business goals. So whether you're using Scrum, Kanban, Waterfall, Hybrid, or a mix, metrics will help you monitor and track progress of project completion or progress, workload distribution, and overall efficiency. We have tools out there, like a lot of tools, like Jira, Azure DevOps. We have ClickUp, Monday, etc., for example, that they have built-in capabilities that you can create custom workflows you can use, and it will not cost you any additional expense to your budget or you will need third-party licensing for that. So let's let me ask you this question: do you know if your metrics you're actually tracking right now do make a difference on your business or your customers? Because that's one of the main challenges that we have faced with customers in different industries.
And Edgar, let me chime in here
Yeah,
because a lot of time engineering leads, they don't like to admit when they need help. A lot of times they inherited a team that maybe had a bunch of bad practices to it, and we're really, it's kind of the battle of today's fires versus fixing the challenges down the road. And a big thing that we like to promote is making sure you understand the ROI of each of your developers, whether they're located in the US, whether they're in LATAM in a nearshore model, or whether they're on an offshore model. And so, Edgar, we see this time and time again. And Larry, we're excited to hear your views on this as well. But, a lot of times we see engineering leads not want to admit this. And usually when executives start pounding for, I need metrics, I need to understand the productivity of the engineering team, because we all know in the engineering world, it takes a long time to get results. So we have to have the right metrics to show the non-technical executives what progress the team is making. You agree or disagree, Edgar?
oh, I agree, and it is one of the biggest challenges we face because it doesn't matter the industry they're in, but sometimes there's some misconception on the engineering departments because usually we track our own metrics that adds value to us, to our engineering department. But there's a lot of metrics out there, operational metrics, quality metrics, business goals. So you need to take into account each and every department when talking about metrics, because I've seen a lot of times that we think that we have the metrics that are needed, but when talking to different stakeholders from different areas, you realize that you're not adding value to them, and they honestly don't care about the metrics that you're following up. So, yeah, I totally agree with you.
And engineering teams have just been getting hammered today as budgets have been getting hammered. And we have to justify the existence, whether it's keeping the current team or growing the team. Keep
Exactly.
going, Edgar.
Okay, so let's start with what mattered the most. You need to have a clear understanding of your business goals, business priorities. That a lot of engineering VPs or directors don't know where to start, or again, they focus on metrics that adds value to their department. But there's a lot of ways or approaches you can take to take into consideration those kinds of metrics. For example, you can get familiar with your company's mission, goals, and perspective, and you can review business plans from your company. You can engage with different stakeholders to review, and you can ask them directly that what's your biggest challenge on your department? What do you need to successfully have productivity on your department? So after talking to them and realizing the company needs, you can then get a sense of what's needed. Again, because it's really common to see metrics out there, but each department focus on their metrics, and they're not adding any value to the company.
Edgar, we see all the time. All right, so what metrics do you want to manage? All of them. You're like, well, wait a minute. You know how much work that's going to be in? Exactly as you said, but interviewing stakeholders, understanding what's core to the business, that's really key. And clients often need help to kind of get over that barrier.
Exactly, and also you need to focus not only on leading indicators but also lagging indicators, because you can take a look back at your historic metrics if you have any, but sometimes you need to take into account also for predictive measures or metrics, sorry, like velocity, for example. It's a predictive metric that you can take advantage of. And for example, customer satisfaction is an example of a lagging metric that you can also use. So you need to iterate, you need to validate with different stakeholders, different areas of your business. Because again, if you're not taking into consideration every area of, or important aspect of your business, those metrics won't add any value to you. So where in this slide we have a sample of those most common metrics that you can use. I'm not gonna go into detail to each and every one of them, but for example, on my take, one of the, after you get a discovery of the project you're working on, one of the first metrics that I always like to use is capacity load. Why? Because in the industry, it's really common that when you go to a developer on a team or a tech leads even, and you ask them, what's your actual capacity for this project? They have no idea. They can answer you that. And neither the stakeholders or the managers of their departments. So it's really important because that way you're not overcommitting yourself on projects or delivery dates or releases. So for me, it's one of the most important metrics that you can have. And sometimes on a daily basis, they have no idea how to accomplish this. How can I get that visibility? I have no idea how. So again, there are several techniques you can use. You can look into past data that you have, if available, but commonly you won't have that data. So what other things you can do is employ some frameworks like time blocking. For example, you can divide your day by fixed commitments, the actual project and other projects that you have, because it's really common for developers to have parallel projects along the way. So you can separate that time slots, or you can use percentages of your actual capacity. Let's say if you work 8 hours a day, you should never take into consideration 100% of your capacity, because you have meetings, you have dailies, you have lunches, you have bathroom breaks. So it's really important to take into consideration around 70 to 75% to allow that padding to help you and be realistic on your actual capacity of your team members.
Edgar, along
Yeah.
those lines, I read a crazy article today in Business Insider that talked about Amazon AWS developers, and that a recent survey they did, their developers are currently spending 10% or less of their time actually developing, because they're in so many meetings all the time that the net of focused development time is 10% of their time. And that's certainly a problem. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree, because again, it's really common to see that the industry don't use capacity planning. So it's really important for a project, for deliverables. And there are also a lot of other metrics that you can use, like velocity, which is important. The one that I want to highlight that you need to take into account and be really careful, because again, metrics give you a high level view, but they can also be misleading if you don't know how to read them or understand them. Because, for example, task completion rate, it's really important, but you need to take into consideration third-party dependencies, defect rate, complexity of the task. You cannot only focus on completion rate per se, because it could be misleading. And you can think that your team is not performing as you wish, but you need to take into account all these complexities that you have. Yeah. Thank you very much. And these are like kind of some of the examples or tools that you can have to that will help you give you that visibility to manage your workflows. Some of them are open source, some of them are not, but you can take advantage for any of these. I'm not going to go into detail, but I put those there so you can see and have some options of what you can get.
I think an important point on this, Edgar, is we've seen a lot of large, sophisticated engineering teams where we're talking 50, 100 plus developers use some really expensive tools to help monitor employee production and what they're doing. Pluralsight Pro is one of those. Phenomenal tool. However, those type of tools can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement initially. And then similar to the same amount a year to be able to maintain it in licensing fees and upgrades. And if your organization is large enough, it makes all the sense in the world. But if you're talking of teams of less than 50 developers, there are great tools out there that many of them are free or very inexpensive that can provide similar insights.
Yeah, and our focus is to take advantage of every free tool you have, every built-in capability, because again, the tools like Jira, Azure DevOps, Monday, ClickUp, they have those built-in capabilities that you can take advantage of, and again, it will not cost you. So it's really important. And for example, for CI/CD pipelines, deployments, you have a lot of options also that it will not cost you any money. Larry is going to talk in a few minutes about one of the biggest ones that you can take advantage of for that. And it's a really useful tool, and you need to take advantage of all of that because you can save a lot of money on your budget. So basically, my conclusion is once you have identified, because it's the first step, identified those metrics that will add value to your business. Once you have that identified, the next step or the most important step is, do you have processes established? Does your engineering department have processes? Because we've seen a lot of issues, or it's really common to come up with a company that won't have processes, or they do, but they do not use them. They are outdated. So once they have processes, you have to define workflows. Because again, there are different workflows for different areas of engineering. For example, support department will use a different workflow than developers. For example, for support, you can use Kanban, is the most common one methodology for support departments, because every day you have a chief on priorities based on tickets that come up. But for development, you can use a Scrum, for example, or you can use Kanban too, but I always recommend Scrum or Agile, because you can do planning, you can do the capacity planning also for your projects, and that way you need to identify those different workflows for your different departments. It's not the same for every department because it would not function or be efficient for you. The other thing that I always recommend is you need to have a defined issue type hierarchy. For example, you need to be on sync with all your projects and your tech leads. If you have epics, user stories, tickets, subtasks, tasks, bugs, whatever you would like to use, but you need to have a defined and established process for that. Once you have that, then you need to think and map your metrics to your business goals and realize, okay, do I have enough data to have those metrics, to capture those metrics? If not, what do we need to do? I always recommend to take advantage of automation rules. You can use custom fields. You can use custom workflows with the tools that we mentioned before. And with that, once you establish that, you're going to be able to capture those metrics that are going to be needed for your business. And again, one of my last recommendations is start small. You need to focus on your most essential metrics for your company. If your company is focusing on delivery, well, start with that and later grow into more metrics, but start small. You can take advantage of creating databases that you can dump all your metrics to have one single source of truth, or you can integrate to your project management tool with whatever you're using, but always start small. Yeah. So in these slides, we have just a couple of examples. I'm not going to go into detail, but those are some examples of the metrics that you can get actually for free. You won't have any expense to your budget. For example, the first one is done in Excel. The other one is from Jira. We have some more examples. You can, yeah. We have Azure DevOps dashboard on Jira also. Can we, yeah, thank you. We have the build and release analytics also. So you have a lot of gadgets and building tools within those platforms that you can take advantage of.
And, having been involved in hundreds, if not thousands of software development projects with engineering teams, we all kind of get blinded by many of people who are on this webinar are probably brought in to solve challenges, to help reorganize the structure. And you roll your sleeves up, you dive in, and it's like, which fire do you want to attack first? And through being an old, experienced entrepreneur, having done it long enough where I figured out how to do it right, it really helps to get an outside opinion. Because sometimes when you're so in the weeds, it's hard to take a step back. It's hard to be able to have a fresh perspective on it. And that is a key thing we offer for companies out there, is we're happy to take a holistic view of what you're doing and look at how to start small and start building that. And usually this pressure comes when you have CFOs and CEOs and board members saying, show me how all this engineering budget is being used, because I don't see the next 10 features of the product that I asked for, because they don't understand. They don't even know what that means. And so that's when this even comes into play the most, is securing and growing your team. So, and Edgar, I know you had a few other examples here as well. These ones were from GitHub, correct?
Correct. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Edgar, for that overview. Appreciate it. And can't stress the importance of making sure everybody understands how to have these metrics and also how to compare developers. We often see that teams will have a mix of US-based, nearshore, and offshore developers. And of course, there's different price points for each of those. But how do you truly measure productivity and what return you're getting on those? And that's been another really hot topic as tech budgets have been under fire here over the past 12 plus months in the market that we've been in. So with that, let's turn it to Larry Heminger, CTO of Jabra Hearing, one of the most experienced engineering CTOs I've ever met in my life, and a great guy. Larry, we're honored to have you here on this webinar with us, and let's turn this over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. I don't know if I can follow that introduction appropriately, but I will try.
Maybe pick up one of those guitars behind you.
There we go. There we go. If we have time. So really quick, Edgar talked about a lot of common metrics that an engineering manager or a director or a VP of engineering would use to monitor their team. You're talking about velocity and capacity and sprint burn downs and pull average time required for a pull request and things of that nature. But what I like to do in the use case part of this presentation is take a step back and let's ask the question from the business perspective: why does any of that matter? And my experience, having been in leadership positions at quite a number of businesses, what the business really cares about is, are you meeting my expectations, right? And expectations is a broad definition, but are we meeting customer expectations? Does the product work? Does it work well? Is the workflow work well? Do customers recommend it to additional potential customers? Did we deliver something on time? Did we meet the business expectations for delivering a feature in the time frame that we expected to? So some of the questions that I'm listing there, kind of have that perspective. From the business perspective, are we meeting our own expectations? Are we meeting time and quality expectations? And to me, taking kind of engineering metrics, and I use the term jargon because a lot of folks outside of engineering are not going to understand what are pull requests, what's my velocity, and why do I care? Why I care is because we want to answer Steve's question, which is, am I getting the most of my engineering team? Do I have the right engineering team? Are we delivering our product on time and with high quality? So that's kind of been my experience, is translating some of the lower level engineering metrics, things that you would measure and monitor your individual teams by, and kind of leveling them up to what really matters to the business. So let's go to the next slide and talk about some of the categories. So these are categories of metrics that, in my experience, have been meaningful to the business. And I'll just kind of walk down the basics of each of the categories. Customer experience, I always list that number one, because to me, that is metric one. Are customers going to recommend my product to their friends and neighbors and peers? And an example of which would be NPS, for example, Net Promoter Score. What better measure of a product success or engineering team can there be than customers recommending your product to their friends, right? So from a business perspective, are my customers happy with my product? That, what better metric is there than trying to answer that question? There's a number of ways to get there. NPS is one way. Measuring conversion rates, if you have an e-commerce platform, that would be another way. User engagement, are customers using my platform or my service to the degree we expect them to? And am I servicing my customers? If there's an escalated issue that engineering has to deal with, are we taking care of that issue in a very timely manner? So to me, customer experience is number one. Closely related to customer experience would be performance. Is my product or my service available when people need it, right? The best product in the world doesn't do much good if it's down, if it's broken, if it isn't working, right? So in my experience, measuring, a lot of my products have been SaaS related or cloud-based over many of my companies, and so the term uptime has been very important to my businesses. Is my product available? If it's designed to be 7/24, is it actually available 7/24? And if it isn't, do we understand why it was down and taking corrective actions? If we have any unplanned incidents, do we understand why? And are we prioritizing resolutions to those? So again, customer experience is number one, but a very close second would be, is my product available for customers to use? Are there specific metrics for remote engineering teams? Yeah, I think everything we're talking about would be 100% applicable, to remote engineering teams. So let me proceed maybe the next slide or two, and then we'll come back and see if we address your question.
Satya, thank you for that question. And please, anyone, feel free to put comments, questions in here, and we will make sure to address them. But thank you, Satya.
Yeah, that's a great question. And by the way, my current company at Jobber Hearing, we are 100% remote, and I will talk about some of the metrics that we're using to to measure and monitor things. Third category, business alignment. Are we delivering? And again, this kind of gets to the question of, are we delivering in a timely manner? Are we deploying features in the time frame that the business is expecting? And also, very importantly, are we working on the things that the business is expecting me to work on? Right? Are we working on the right things? All the velocity and capacity and pull request metrics, those are great, but how do we know we're working on the right things? So, to me, one of the important metrics there is my work that we're prioritizing on a team by team basis, is that aligned with my product team, right? Is that aligned with what the business is expecting and in the order they're expecting it? So that's the business alignment, perspective. Quality, Edgar talked a little bit about this in his portion. How do I know the product I'm developing and deploying is working correctly? So there's several metrics to look at from a quality perspective. One that we're going to talk about in the next couple slides will be change failure rate. When I deploy a feature, is it working? Did I have to roll it back? Did I have to do a quick bug fix because we let a bug escape? So that's very closely aligned to customer experience, right? From a perspective of quality, is it working the way we're expecting it to work? And then lastly, efficiency. Edgar talked a little bit about this, and it's important to understand: are we completing the work that we were assigned in the time period that it was expected to be completed? What's the utilization of my engineering team? Am I deploying on a regular basis? There are clear ways to measure that. So I think Steve kind of mentioned earlier, from a business perspective, engineering teams are expensive. Am I getting the most out of my team, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to get at with team efficiency. Are we getting?
Mary, let me jump in and ask you a question. You have been involved in some very complex engineering teams at different companies. Have you ever seen the metrics be the same from one company to the other, or are each unique?
No, never. I think when you're generally speaking using an agile methodology, there's a general set of metrics that almost always in some way, shape, or form apply, right? But the way you apply them is going to be different. Every company I've worked for, it's going to be a little different, and it depends on the product you're developing. Is it a SaaS? Then I care about uptime, and I care about deployment frequency. If it's a hardware product, I have other metrics that are important. So to your point, Steve, it's been different.
I like how, we kind of talked about engineering team level metrics to look at. And I like how you've taken it to, okay, that's important for the engineering team, but what are the business metrics that we really need to be looking at? And that's a really important distinction to make sure that all of them align.
And absolutely. And anything I'm using to monitor my teams on a more lower level basis need to map into what matters to the business in some way, shape, or form, right? And so when you're talking about looking at velocity and burn downs and things of that nature, that falls into, am I delivering on time, right? And that's really something that the business cares about. So what we're showing here is one of my former companies picking up on several of the metrics I just mentioned, talking about uptime, downtime, hours, and incidents, tasks completed, and number of bugs completed. These are things that we used at one of my former companies. And so I'm just showing that you don't have to have an expensive or fancy dashboard. This is just a spreadsheet, and we're collecting those metrics on a daily basis. But there are some metrics, to Steve's point, that are probably more important than others at a given point in time. And with this particular company, we had an issue with some outages. It was a SaaS related business, and we had some issues where we had more downtime than we wanted to, and that was customer impacting. And so, looking at NPS, for example, customer satisfaction was starting to take a dip because some of the features they needed to use on a daily basis were down. So those were number one for this particular company. And we were kind of measuring and monitoring how our uptime was doing. if we did have downtime, the lessons learned from that is really the important part of the metric. It may not be, are we 98% up or 99% up, but for the 1 or 2% where you're down, do your engineering teams really understand what happened, and are we prioritizing corrective actions to those issues so that we can keep moving the needle upwards, right? I mean, obviously you want to be 100% available at all times, but realizing that that may be a very expensive place to be. But am I making progress towards improving that metric? And so at the bottom of this chart, you're seeing how in that particular company, we were looking at several of the metrics that really matter to us and tracking them over time. And you're looking for the trends. Are we getting better? And if not, why? And really kind of understanding the reasons behind maybe there was an outage or two, or we missed an expectation here or there. That it is what it is. But understanding the reason why and putting corrective measures in place to deal with that, and in order to make improvements, to me, that's the value of the metric, right? It's understanding what happened, fully transparent with the business, and putting plans in place to continuously improve.
So Larry, as a very experienced CTO and industry veteran, I'm sure on many occasions you have dealt with the business or sales side always wants to blame engineering. The engineering side, wants to blame the business side. So how important are these type of metrics to defending the engineering department, the IT area in these kind of situations?
That's a great question, Steve, and I'll take a slight twist on answering that. In that, I think my role as a CTO and the role of an engineering leader is to not necessarily defend the team, but it's to be transparent. What actually happened, right? And a lot of times the answer may not be within the engineering team. When you look at cycle time, for example, that's something Edgar mentioned previously. What are the components of cycle time? From the time you decide to do something to the time it's available to customers, there's a lot of people that touch it along the way. It may not be a software engineer that where a bottleneck was. It might have been in a user interface design. It might have been in requirements. It might have been in testing. It might have been some hiccup, somewhere along the way. So I think it's important to take a transparent view of this. And, the purpose of metrics is not to point the finger at anyone or any department. The point of a metric is to understand why. Where are we currently, being transparent with the business and with the goal of continuous improvement, right? So it's not defending the team. It's here's the data, here's the information, here's what happened. Let's go fix it. That's my answer to your question.
That is a phenomenal answer. Thanks, Larry.
So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about one of the tools where we can kind of accomplish a couple of the objectives here at the same time. One objective is to automate some of the metrics that are important. The other is to do so in a very cost-effective manner. So I'm introducing the concept of DORA. DORA stands for DevOps Research Assessment. That was a nonprofit group, and Google wound up buying, taking on that project at some point. I don't recall what year that happened. But we've defined a set of metrics that is referred to as DevOps Research Assessment, and they take a very nice approach at metrics that are meaningful to the business, and we'll talk in the next slide about some of the keys to that. DORA can be implemented in a couple different ways. They have an open source project called Apache DevLake. So the relationship between DORA and Apache DevLake is a open source project that implements the DORA metrics. That's the relationship. Being an open source project, there was no cost to utilize and integrate DevLake with your particular setup. Edgar had talked about several slides back. He presented a slide that had a bunch of tools on it The interesting and nice thing about DevLake is it does integrate with GitHub, it integrates with Jira, it integrates with Azure DevOps. So it integrates with a lot of tools and gives us a way to automate some of these metrics. So Dora is kind of the standard. DevLake is one tool. There are also other commercial related products that implement Dora metrics as well. So let's go to the next slide and talk about what some of those metrics are. So here's kind of the 4 categories that Dora helps us measure and monitor. And to one of the questions you're talking about metrics, measuring and monitoring for remote teams. Everything we're talking about here can be implemented fully remote teams. Again, DevLake can be used to integrate to commonly used platforms like GitHub, Bitbucket, Jira, etc. And so everything we're talking about here can be fully automated. And there's 4 key metrics here that I think do a really good job of mapping into what matters to the business. Deployment frequency is super important because that's a measure of how agile my team is and how often we're deploying new features to customer-facing systems. One of the other nice things about Dora is they do an interesting job of allowing you to analyze how your teams are doing with respect to the rest of the industry. And so they have 4 levels of performance: low, medium, high, and elite. And each of the metrics have kind of a different definition of what that means. And that's what I'm indicating there on the table. So for example, on deployment frequency, if you're deploying once a month or less, well, that's kind of a general definition of a low performing team. If you're deploying once or more per month, you're kind of in the medium category. If you're deploying once or more per week, you're in the high category. And if you're deploying once a day, you're in the elite category. So with every metric, there's kind of a definition of where you kind of ought to be if you're aiming for a high performing team. So a lot of times, like I see on LinkedIn all the time, what's the definition of a high performing engineering team? Well, Dora kind of takes a stab at being objective about answering that question. And so if you talk about frequency, if you talk about lead time, you talk about quality metrics, you talk about time to repair certain things or time to do bug fixes, well, they're actually telling you this is what we think a high performing team looks like in those across those categories. So this is an interesting way to look at your company's teams and say, well, let's measure ourselves to, what Google thinks is the right answer to some of those questions. So we talked about deployment frequency. Cycle time is the next category. And again, that's important to understand from the time that your team start working on a feature to the time it gets deployed. What was that time like? And so that's referred to as cycle time. Change failure rate we mentioned as a measure of quality. That basically is the kind of the rubber band effect. If I deployed something, but it bounced back because it didn't work, right? That would be a failure. I deployed a change that didn't work and I had to roll it back. And if you're an elite team, we want that to happen no more than 15% of the time. And I would argue that's a generous metric. If every 10 times you deploy a feature to a customer-facing team, if out of 10 times, 1 time you had to roll it back, that's still not so great, from a customer experience perspective. So the lower that number gets, the better off you'll be. And then time to restore service, that's kind of more of an operations number. That basically means if you did have an issue or you had a bug and the customer discovered it, how long did it take you or your team to get that resolved? So these 4 Dora metrics come out of the box from the Apache DevLake project. You can automate the collection of these sort of metrics given certain fields in your Jira setup or in your code base. There's a little bit of configuration you have to do. This is something my current company has implemented, and literally within, I'd say a couple weeks time frame, we were able to take the project and get it integrated in several different areas, and lo and behold, you get some nice dashboards, and you can get some automatic reporting going on. So
Larry, so this is what Dora or Google said, where, realistically organizations should strive for within these. Of course, everyone's going to say, well, we have to be elite, but that's not
yeah,
always realistic. What's your opinion?
yeah, I think it's definitely dependent on the company and the product we were developing. I think you'd always want to aim for medium or high. And you look at deployment frequency as an example. If you're deploying once a week, at several of my companies, that was a pretty good standard. Deploying once a day, Google defines that as elite. That's a great goal, but it definitely requires some infrastructure. You've got to be 100% automated, right, in your CI/CD processes to get there. You've got to have a lot of QA automation in place in order to get to a to. I think high or elite is certainly a good goal, but depends on the size of your team and kind of where your priorities lie.
Gotcha.
But I think in my experience, investing in automation, investing in CI/CD is going to, from a long-term perspective, be well worth the investment.
So Larry, we had a question come in from Jagadish, and would love to hear your thoughts on this, on metrics around innovation.
Yeah, that's a great question. Off the top of my head, what comes to mind, it would be capacity allocation. And when you say innovation, I guess I'm thinking more like R&D tasks as opposed to day-to-day, sort of priority tasks. So, the way we look at that, at my current company is we think about what amount of your time, either on a team basis or a personal basis, do you want to spend doing some more front end, researchy, sort of tasks. So what I've done in the past is I think about resource allocation as my metric, and I say, okay, maybe I kind of more bottom up approach. So from a sustaining perspective, okay, maybe 25% of my time I'm going to deal with bug fixing and sustaining engineering, and then maybe another 50% of my time we want to spend on incremental feature development. And so what does that leave left? Maybe we allocate 20% of our time to innovation. And so kind of managing on an allocation basis is maybe one way to think about it. And then monitoring the sort of work that your team's doing and what category does it fit into. Is it bug fixing, sustaining? Is it features, or is it R&D? And seeing if you can kind of keep that allocation in check. Did I answer kind of the gist of your question? Okay.
Thank you, Larry.
So what we're showing here is some example dashboards that you get with Apache DevLake. There's a lot of data here, so I apologize for the eye chart. On the left-hand side, that green bar would be the deployment frequency. So how many times are we deploying per month? And that is probably showing kind of in the elite category because it's lots of deployments per month. So again, these are kind of out of the box. These are Grafana based dashboards. These come out of the box with Apache DevLake. And I think to Edgar's point, you don't need to invest in a super expensive platform. This kind of stuff is available at a fairly low cost. What else we got? Yeah, so that's kind of most of what I wanted to talk about. Happy to tackle additional questions. You can find Dora online. You can find DevLake online. The link there, Dora and Google Cloud, that's kind of Google's take on Dora and some of the tools that they provide. I've also published an article on Medium called Product Metrics That Matter. It talks about some of the same topics that we talked about today. So I hope this was interesting. And Steve, I'll hand it back to you.
Larry, thank you for your insights. Appreciate it. And I love how you leveled this up from a business perspective as well, and how to holistically view the whole department. I can't stress more what a hot topic this has been in the market that we're seeing engineering teams just get hammered on, as the business side doesn't always understand. I don't want to say never understands, but almost always, rarely understands what's going on in the engineering team. There's only so many tangible things they can see. And we have seen this be the ultimate solution to not only quantify the existing budget that's going to your team, but also use this as a way to gain additional resources for your team, and laying it out in the manner that the business can understand and that the business can feel comfortable on the performance of the engineering department. Larry, I think you said it best. Transparency is really the only way to go. And you got to make sure everybody understands the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what it's going to take to get to certain goals. So, Edgar, Larry, thank you so much for your insights that you brought to it. To everybody listening, we very much appreciate you being on. We are here to help. If there's anything we can do to help your organization, we offer free consultations around all of this. If you have any questions, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, just reach out to us via these means. And we appreciate everybody's time. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and happy holidays to everybody. Thank you.